Welcome to this edition of Assembly Update. I'm Mike Friesen. With our program today, we feature Assemblyman Mike Norris of the 144th Assembly District. Mike Norris represents, and we want to thank you folks all across Western New York for tuning in for our program today. There's Mike Norris, and Mike Norris, we're happy to see you. It's a great day in Albany.
It's a great day in
Light of
Albany.
work can begin, right?
Yeah, it is, and the sun is actually shining here for February, which we appreciate. So, Mike, thank you for having me on the show. It's always a pleasure to report to my constituents right here from Albany.
And we've even got temperature forecasts in the high 50s, maybe even into the low 60s in the month of February. We're never going to turn that away. Not ever.
No, I remember the year where we did not get above 32 for the entire month of February. So we're going to take this weather and move forward into spring and have a great summer as well.
We could have some great fun and talk about Super Bowl and terrific weather forecasts for this entire 15 minutes, but I'm afraid, Mike Norris, we've got some serious legislative business to be talking about here at the state capitol. We are hearing call after call for the governor and the legislative leaders to do something about the crime situation in New York State. In particular, how changes in the state laws from a couple of years ago, which were lumped together under the guise of bail reform, need to be maybe amended, changed in some way that would keep dangerously, seriously dangerous criminals off the streets of New York State.
There's no question. We need to repeal the so-called bail reform laws of 2019 that was put forth by Governor Cuomo at the time, and the downstate-driven majorities. And I have to tell you, I opposed them then. I remember sitting on the floor that night. It was done, again, unfortunately, in the middle of the night when then Assembly member, who now is a state senator, Anthony Palumbo, talked about the ramifications of what was going to happen if these reforms were enacted. And I remember it plain as day. Let me just share a story that just happened right outside of my district in Niagara County, in the city of North Tonawanda. What happened is that there were two illegal immigrants, and that's important right off the bat. They don't even belong in our country. They were here illegally, and they harassed a victim, a female victim, said that they were calling from the police department. They actually spoofed the telephones so it looked like on the phone it was the North Tonawanda Police Department, claimed that she's being targeted by terrorists, and harassed her for $40,000 and continue to do that. And then what happened is she thought something was certainly amiss. She called the North Tonawanda Police Department, said, "What is going on?" And they're like, again, they got involved. I want to thank law enforcement, our North Tonawanda City Police Department in particular in this situation. They did a sting operation, and they were able to lure these illegals. I cannot believe this. Right to the front door, to the house of this victim, to pick up the $40,000. Now, thank God that the police were there to apprehend these suspects. Now, I also want to point this out because this is important. If they were U.S. citizens, if they were here legally, and they were charged with the state crimes that they could charge in this situation, they would appear before the judge, they would then be arraigned, and then they would have to be let out, period. Because of the so-called bail reform laws of 2019, which I opposed, the Republicans opposed, we knew what would happen. And I will also go on to say that this is just another example of individuals who would be let out and would be a threat to our society. Who knows what would have happened? Who knows what other individuals would have been harassed and victimized by these two? And fortunately, the city court judge in North Tonawanda was smart enough, made sure that the loophole with the federal system, and they had to be detained for a period of time, I understand, in Batavia. But under the Biden administration, they're already out. They're out with an ankle bracelet. And I understand, too, they can be cut off. They're going to be long gone. And the point of bail in general is to make sure that they are detained or they have the ability with that bond, the purpose to be, and then make sure they get back to court. These folks are never going to be back to court. And the thing is also, if it was the state charge and they were U.S. citizens, they would have been let out right away after their arraignment. And I believe that these individuals are a danger to society. They are a danger to society. They went to this victim's home. What could have happened if she was there by herself without the help of law enforcement? I've asked many constituents of mine, and I've been out at volunteer fire company dinners. I had breakfast at a few locations, and I asked them, do you think that people who are accused of this type of crime should be able to be let out back into society so quickly to potentially repeat the offense again and victimize others? And they're like, absolutely not. I have to tell you, any reasonable person knows this just shocks the conscience. So this is one example, Mike, of so many that are happening across the state of New York. I stood with State Senator Rob Ortt, with Assemblyman Angelo Morinello and County Sheriff Mike Filicetti this past Saturday, and we brought this into attention at a press conference. And we've called upon the governor, again, over and over and over again, to make sure that in this budget, when she's negotiating, that these so-called bail reforms are repealed and that judicial discretion be given back to our judges who have the background, they can weigh the factors and the circumstances, weigh the threat to our society, and be vested with the opportunity to determine whether or not individuals should be retained in jail pending their trial.
And you say that is one example of so many. We read over and over again, particularly in the New York City tabloids, where someone commits the crime, then they are let right back out, and in some cases, just commit another crime, right straight up again, in just a matter of a day or two, and then rinse and repeat, right? I mean, it just keeps going on, and until these people are off the streets, I think a lot of people all across New York State, from Western New York to the Adirondacks, down to the Southern Tier and to New York City, are saying to themselves, I don't know that this is a very safe place to be right now.
We had situations in Cheektowaga, for example, where they let someone out who should have been retained and committed a very heinous crime. These things are happening across the city of New York. And what the problem is, it is over and over again and making our communities less safe. And, the policies that have been put into effect, raise the age, for example, to 18. We have to go, and I voted against that. The people have got to be responsible for the actions of their consequences, for the consequences of their actions. It's very simple to me. And I know of my constituents, the people I represent in the 144th district, they understand the outrage. Mike, I'm very level-headed typically, but I am angry about this. And I tell you, the constituents in my district are angry about this. And this has to be addressed right now in this state budget. And I call upon the governor to hold firm on this, because people's lives are at stake and their safety is at stake.
The questions are going to be whether or not it is a serious matter for the governor, as you just suggested, as well as the legislative leaders, the heads of the Assembly and the Senate, because they're going to have to be on board. And so far, all indications are that that's not necessarily the case.
It doesn't appear that way, unfortunately, from the downstate-driven majorities of the Senate and of the Assembly, but it better be. And I tell you, the voters recognized that this is a problem in the last election. I mean, the governor squeaked by an election. Crime was the top issue with inflation, and people feel unsafe. They feel unsafe in New York. And it's time that we restore judicial discretion. And another thing which is important to point out is that the dangerous standard, I mentioned earlier that the purpose of bail is to make sure they come back to court, right? That's the main purpose. But in New York, if someone is a danger to society and the judge knows that, that's not a true factor for them to be held. And we're the only state out of 50 where the dangerous standard is not a factor to be considered by the judge. I know many judges, they are elected, they take their job very seriously, and they should be given to judicial discretion to weigh all the factors and to make a determination of whether or not an individual poses a threat to our society, and they should be detained in jail pending their trial. And it's that simple. So I hope, and I will continue to be loud about this. I know Senator Rob Ward is. I will continue to be, and same with Assemblyman Angela Morinello, my colleague from Niagara Falls, who
Who's a judge.
actually has the experience as a judge of 14 years as a judge in the city court system in Niagara Falls, and served as an acting county court judge too. He dealt with this. Someone like Judge Morinello and other judges should be given that authority to determine whether or not someone standing in front of them, a defendant, should be held on a dangerous standard and make sure they come back to court. And judicial discretion, including the dangerous standard, must be instituted. And I will continue to be loud about this because it's impacting the safety of our communities all across New York, not just in New York City, in North Tonawanda, in my district, in Cheektowaga, and other places in Western New York as well.
And I think anybody who observes what's going on or what goes on at the state capitol in Albany knows that this is going to be the issue this year. That if something doesn't get done about this, this legislative session is going to be considered a failure, probably, for most people who keep close tabs as to what goes on here. In our remaining few minutes, in our last program, we talked about how you this year, sir, are going to serve as the ranking member on the Assembly's Transportation Committee. As the budget process continues on here at the Capitol, we're at that stage now where public hearings are being held. The transportation hearing was held here in Albany just days ago. There's a lot of discussion on a lot of different topics having to do with transportation. The Thruway Authority was discussed. We heard from the Thruway Authority chairman. Also, the things that you would expect, potholes, the importance of maintaining roads and bridges. Give us some kind of a recap as to what the people watching this program can take away from that.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm privileged to serve as the ranking member of the Transportation Committee now, just recently appointed by Leader Will Barkley. Very grateful for the opportunity because it allows me a louder voice in making sure we look at our infrastructure. Now, Mike, I'm very critical of state spending in New York State. $221 billion is the current budget. They want to raise it now to $227 billion. By the time this is all negotiated, I guarantee it'll be around 228 to 229 billion, which is way too much. People are leaving our state in droves because of high taxes and because of the high regulations. With that being said, though, it's time to get back to the basics and make investments, what the government should be doing on real programming. I got to tell you, this is an area where we must invest. You talk to any town supervisor, highway superintendent, they need help because the roads are crumbling, their bridges are crumbling, and they need also help with culverts and water and sewer pipes.
I need to interrupt. We are out of time, sir. We'll catch up more in our next program, all right? We'll be talking more about the budget process and how that plays out here at the state capitol. We want to thank Mike Norris for joining us, just like we thank you folks, too, for spending your time with us. We'll hope to see you soon for our next edition of Assembly Update.